Hey everyone, Doug here from 2 Plus Tough, and I wanted to do a quick video while it's still in my brain about some really cool stuff that happened yesterday. If you don't follow me on Instagram or Facebook, or even Twitter, which I just started using, basically I went to an event yesterday that I wasn't expecting to go to, and it was a long day, but it was an incredibly fun one. And so what I'm going to do in this video is I have my player packet, just like I did when I finished my last event at Mox, doing like the Krampus narrative event, which I loved. Basically, I'm just going to go and talk through my games and those kinds of things. Yeah, a bit of housekeeping. If you haven't seen the videos already about the update to sales and stuff like that with the store closing, go check out that video. It's one I posted just earlier today. There's like a slight delay on the mats, and then magnets are going out today. So that's one of the throw that little public service announcement. And I see the chat has already got some activity. Awesome. Let me know if you can hear and see me okay. You make sure my prompter thing is working. Okay, cool. So this is for when I go switching around screens. So I knew that there was an event coming up called, this is the actual name, it's an RTT, Battle at the Tower, a Warhammer ITC Age of Sigmar tournament. And this is actually up in Bellingham, Washington, which is about an hour and a half-ish north of me. And for the longest time, I didn't think I was going to be able to go. I was a little bit bummed out. The gentleman who is running it, Michael, he is an awesome person. He's come down a few times to our local game nights. He's been a patron for forever, and is just a really cool guy, and I wanted to go. Well, things kind of aligned this week with a coworker needing to swap shifts and that kind of stuff, that I ended up with a 4-day weekend where I could go to this thing. And so frantically on Thursday night, I called up the store, reserved a spot, and then I was like, crap, I gotta get an army together, because if you don't know, I just sold my Beast of Chaos and I'm still building the Skaven, so I don't quite have a full 2,000 point list. And so I'm gonna switch to talking about the list that I brought here in just a second. But just so you know, because the second I posted my list yesterday, I got questions of why would you take Grand Alliance Chaos instead of Skaventide? It's because I don't have enough Clan Rats to go Skaventide, and not enough Scryer to go all Scryer, not enough Pestilence to go all Pestilence. So we'll get there. I just wanted to go and support a friend and local community and that kind of stuff, and also just play some games. So the most games I played with Skaven back to back. So that's kind of cool. Let me pull up my list here and we'll chat about it. Let me make sure that command here prompt just worked. Okay, cool. You're seeing what I see. Hello to everyone in the chat. So my list came from a few things. One, I wanted to use as many Skaven models as I own because I wanted to get practice in, right? I want to get repetition in with using these models and really flex what they're good at and that kind of stuff. Beyond that, I was chatting with Jack from Rolling Ones, and he was like, if you're going Grand Alliance, take all the good stuff because they're the weakest kind of variant of Chaos right now. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to take all of the most badass things that I own. And really, if you look at the list, which we'll go through, it's all Skaven. It's just that I lack enough Clan Rats to go for the battle line requirements. And so I have 2 units of minimum Chaos Warriors in there, which actually ended up being very important. So yeah, so my list that I brought is the Arch Warlock, the Warlock Engineer, which is the old school engineer that we've had for forever, the Bombardier, which came from the Carrion Empire set, 2 units of 5 Chaos Warriors, for a block of 40 Clan Rats, and that's my battle line options, those 3. In addition to that, I have 40 Plague Monks. We'll talk about those guys a lot. This, I actually typed it in here wrong, but they actually had the blades and a staff, is how I built them. Other stuff was I had enough extra points to throw in a unit of 5 Scryer Acolytes. They did nothing all game but distracted people, which is great. 3 Storm Fiends, 2 units of Warplock Jezzails, and then, of course, 2 Warp Lightning Cannons. And I actually have some pictures here. So there's my Clan Rats, which we painted in that big marathon live stream, as well as here's everything else. So I got my leaders up top, bunch of Chaos Warriors jammed in there, Storm Fiends. So originally I was going to bring a list with just the stuff that I had painted, but it was very disjointed. It wasn't good at anything. And so I was like, if I'm just going to support this guy, why not have fun? Basically their rule was if you don't have a fully painted army, you're not eligible for prize support, which is fine by me, again. So I just was like, you know what, let's go experiment with as much Skaven stuff as possible. I can know, like, kind of get a sense of, like, what the painting priority should be as far as, like, things that I find very fun and engaging, and just not worry about prizes. Let's just go meet people, have fun, and laugh. And that's exactly what I did. So this is the army as it looks right now, and I was up till, like, 11:30 building the second Warp Lightning Cannon and putting the Giselles on bases. So we'll close out of that. So yeah, that is the list that I brought. And I generally liked it. I had enough models to bubble wrap everything. The warriors are being 2 wounds each with 4 up save. They're just beefy compared to the 40 clan rats and the plague monk. So I was actually ended up being very, very, I don't know, just useful. So we're going to dive into my games here, and we'll go to the downward cam. So our first round, actually, I do want to make a note here before I do this. I want to talk about the venue, and that is a place called Dark Tower Games. And let me see if I have I think the picture there places in the thumbnail, but anyway, that's the big store. I didn't grab any pictures of the inside, but I will try to find some. But it is this incredible game store. It's very spacious. Like, the tables are in sort of like a staggered formation. So you have one table here, and another one that, like, their ends touch for about 2 feet, and then it goes off in the other direction. And they have little shelves underneath each table. So, like, when you put all that together, you have the maximum efficient use of space because you can jam more tables in because they're staggered that way. So there was, I think, 7 or 8 tables. I didn't actually count. But what that meant is everyone had an individual space and tray. There was no clutter everywhere. We weren't bumping into each other because of the way they were staggered out. There's occasionally, like, if someone had to get a really, I don't know, maybe like the occasional, like, odd angle he had to stretch over. I'm just looking at the chat. Some strange, but anyway, making sure I'm still working. Okay. Every once in a while I see something in the chat that I'm like, what are you guys talking about? And I get confused and I get worried that it's not working. But anyway, the tables were all staggered and that kind of stuff. And so it was really great. In the back of the store, there was a Magic the Gathering tournament going on. And then beyond that, there was like a youth D&D thing where it's just like all kids under 12, and it was really, really cool. Certainly one of the highlights of the store, and I told the guy working there that's like, it's the most diverse store that I've been. Lots of men, women of different communities, like transgender, and there's just a lot of different stuff going on. I thought it was really incredible. So kudos to them. Dark Tower Games, awesome store. Go there, catch the fever. So coming down to the event packet here, we started off round 1. A few things before I jump into the first round. There were Realmscape features, and I'll go through what those were. What is this stuff? Endless spells were allowed. If you had your book, you could use realm spells, I believe, but no one really talked about it because I'm not sure why. Beyond that, there was also, because they wanted to kind of lower the mental barrier of entry, there were no secondary objectives, and there were no, you and your opponent could decide if you wanted to use terrain features or not every round. And there was no, if someone said yes, you did it. If you both said no, it's fine. Keeping it loosey-goosey for folks who are a little bit newer to tournament scenes and don't want to be overwhelmed, that kind of stuff. So yeah, we're going to talk about, let's see, make sure the downward cam's on. First round was Border War. Now keep in mind, I got this packet, I signed up for the event late Thursday night, and it was a Saturday morning, so like I didn't have very much time to prepare. So Border War, if you're not familiar with that, divide the table in half. There's an objective on you, your opponent in the middle of your territory, and then there's 2 on the border. And basically it's that very, very simple one. I love this scenario. It's so easy. You just defend your objective, fight over the 2 middle ones, and if you can, steal your opponents for the maximum amount of points. Now, what made this one hard for me was the fact that our Realmscape feature was in Ulgu Perpetual Dusk. The maximum range of attacks or spells is 12 inches. So, we'll come back to my list here, and you can see I have a lot of shooting. I have Warp Lightning Cannons, I have Giselles. The Storm Fiends all have pretty great ranged guns, like I should say they shouldn't all, but the Wind Launcher on him does. The Bombardier has an 18-inch gun, and all their spells are pretty great range. So like all those things were crippled. But I tried my best, and I got set up in a weird way. Basically, my mistake in this game was I didn't have my heroes near my horde units to be able to use Inspiring Presence. And so that really, I just don't know what I was thinking. It was my first time running the list. Again, I threw it together really quickly. And I don't know. So they just weren't in the right place to do what they needed to do. And with the hampered range to shooting, it makes it really bad when my opponent was a Fire Slayer's army, round 1. So I'll run through his list here. I got it off of PCB, and I'll just run through real quick. It's an Auric Runefather and Magmadroth with the Fury of the Fire Slayer's trait and the Obsidian Coronet artifact. He has a Rune Master, 2 Rune Smiters, a Battlesmith, and the Grimwrath Berserker. A block of 20 Volkite Berserkers, a block of 30 Berserkers, and 30 Hearthguard Berserkers with the battalion, the Lords of the Lodge. So, for those of you who are not familiar with Fire Slayer armies, what this really is the 2 Rune Smiters can each take a unit and put them in reserve, and they are deployed outside 9 inches of an enemy in pretty much any of your movement phases. And then up the center, he put the big block of 30 Hearthguard Berserkers, who, because of the Lords of the Lodge battalion, get to pile in an attack twice if they're within so much distance. It's on a model-by-model basis of the heroes in that battalion. So it's huge. Let me see if I think I have a picture of it. Oh yeah, here we go. So this is his, the main bulk of it, right? This is the Hearthguard dudes, the heroes. And they have the pole axes that like barf a mortal wound on you every time they hit, which is not, it's like on a 4-up, you take a mortal wound in addition. So there's that. There's his Runefather. I love the yellow. This army looked really, really good. They have this nice ashen skin. And so talking about Border War specifically, if you look at our little map here, let's pretend always that the side facing me is him. I'll grab a pen so we can point at it. Basically, on the first turn, he took the first turn, and he just deployed a big block of 30 Volkites here and a big block of 20 Volkites here, and then came up the center with his elite, whatever the Hearthguard guys are, who deal mortal wounds. And so basically, he just sat on his objectives and asked if I could grind him off of them. And the thing is that with the hampered range, all of my guns, they couldn't get there until turn 2. They just weren't doing anything. And then when they did, it just wasn't enough. And so for this, the win went to the Fire Slayers. I took out the big block of 30 Hearthguard Berserkers. So maybe I was like, maybe if I like bolt, I could destroy them because they're the closest to my range. And if I bolt forward, I might be able to just camp on his objective and just really rack up some points and figure something out for the others. But there wasn't enough time. So that was a pretty heavy loss. That was like every single turn he was getting his objective and the 2 middle ones. So just point wise, he just ground me out. There were a few other things here, like for example, like so in normal Fire Slayers army, you just target the heroes, and that's the first priority. But I couldn't, with the range thing, I couldn't reach behind their lines to snipe them. Beyond that, I'm trying to think of what else. There were a few things like I think he was just flustered and a little bit like, your first round you get all set up, you just kind of forget things, and so it was stuff like the Rune Master, if you don't know, is supposed to before the game begins. You tell your opponent like, hey, pick a unit, and they have Urgold, and so they get to be better in combat. But if my Rune Master is near that unit, he can like basically tell everyone to attack it, and like everyone gets crazy bonuses against it. But we didn't know that until turn 2. So then I'm like looking at my board, trying to be like, well, who do I give it to? And then there's a little bit of confusion, like when does that kick in? When does the effect happen? And so there's a little bit back and forth where it's like the rules got kind of shaky. And it's a mental burden, right, when you forget rules and that kind of stuff. So I did suggest a remember me list after that, politely. And he was a really nice guy. I don't think he was cheating. There was nothing, I don't think, malicious or malevolent about it. I think he just got flustered. And so I did say, like, just so you know, my models aren't painted. There's a few of these instances. And on the last one, I was like, just so you know, my models aren't painted. I'm not going to win anything, but there are people here who will. So you just need to take a breath and just kind of think about these things, communicate clearly. So it wasn't a bad conversation. We had a great game, a beautiful army, as I showed you. I just, with the range thing kind of hampered me. I just never had a chance to deal enough mortal wounds to get him off of those objectives. And so we will move into round 2. But here's the thing. Here's why I love losing round 1. Because anything after that is just gravy. Like, you know, like there's just a certain intensity where like, I want to do well. But the second you lose, you're like, I'm just going to have fun. You know what I mean? So for the rest of the event, I just had a blast. That's exactly what we're going to talk about here. So let's do round 2. So for round 2, I didn't capture many pictures of this. Oh, this is all of us getting ready to go to the event in the morning. It was a lot of fun. I don't think I actually captured very many pictures. Yeah, okay. So go to here. And so he took a Seraphon army, which I'll go through in just a minute. But this objective, or the battle plan, I'm sorry, was shifting objectives. If you're not familiar with this, you lay the board out as normal. However, you divide it long ways. So we each had this huge deployment area, and we're fighting over this middle section. Within that middle section, there are 3 objectives. And at the beginning of each battle round, you roll a dice. And it has objective 1, 2, and 3. And basically, one of those objectives, depending on what you roll, is worth 3 points. The other 2 are worth 1 point each. So it's like you want to fight for all of them, but the one that is valuable is in constant flux. And so, yeah, basically what happened here, and I'll go through his list. Let me just pull this back up. Here we are. So he had, this is Rob, by the way, great opponent. So Rob brought a Slann Starmaster with the Great Rememberer and Green Glade Flask from Girain, which I don't actually know what that does. The Saurus Old Blood on Carnosaur with Gear Strike. He had the Skink Priest and the Skink Star Priest. Now his units were 10 Skinks, 10 Skinks, 10 Skinks, 10 Skinks, a unit of 6 Ripperdactyl Riders, and 5 Chameleon Skinks. He also had a Bastiladon and a Troglodon, and a lot of that was part of the Shadow Strike Star Host. And so, a few things to note here. He is new to the army, and so what that means, practically speaking, is he was up till like super late building the last of these models, so he didn't have this like big pool of summoning stuff that he could bring in, which matters. I mean, for armies like Seraphon and demon-focused stuff, like not having that toolbox of bringing things on, you know, those things are factored into the army. So, I don't know. Adrian says, I believe that one is a once per game heal D6. Yeah, it definitely could be. That makes sense. And I'll go to the picture that I had pulled up. And so I just took a quick snap of his deployment. Again, I try to stay off my phone just out of respect. But he kind of scattered his 4 skinks. You know, we see there's 1 up top, and 2 towards the center on each side, and 1 towards the bottom. These little trees we have, this green tree right here, marks the objectives. We just use little trees as objectives. Now, what you can see, and this is important, behind this building on the bottom is one of the Star Priests. Behind this blue-topped building is another Star Priest, or the Skink Priest. And behind this big building over here is, what am I doing? Is the Slann. So he knew that I had shooting, and Krokgar 69. That's my army. Hello. Yeah, so he knew that I had shooting. My assumption was, and we didn't chat about it too much, I think he was afraid of me just blowing his heroes off the board, which is super legit if you look at my list. Because you know what loves Seraphon heroes is Warplightning Cannons and Jezzails for days. So he played very defensively, and he gave me first turn, which was interesting. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting him to be more aggressive on the objectives, and so when I got first turn, I just bolted a big fat blob of 40 Plague Monks onto the middle one, 40 Clan Rats onto the far top one. You can see them up in the top right. And then on the bottom left, I kind of gambled. I was like, okay, I'm at least going to cover heavily 2 out of the 3 of these things and hope that mathematically I can, keep them. Or that the shifting objective lands that one of those 2 are more valuable at some point in the game. And so on the bottom, which you can't see there, just off screen, was I had the Storm Fiends, a unit of Jezzails, and the Scryer Acolytes. And so I just let them run forward and grab that objective. So turn 1, I believe the valuable objective was in the bottom, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, that's not true. It was up top, because the Clan Rats seized it first. That's right. So the Clan Rats bolted forward, got 3 points. Plague Monks went forward, got 1 point, and the little separate unit in the bottom got another point as well. And I think I have a picture here of my deployment. Yeah. So here you can see this is my bottom flank that caught that bottom objective. And then I had my 40 Plague Monks right there in the front catching that objective. And I bubble wrapped them so well because I was scared of those Ripperdactyls coming in and getting my cannons, that I had the Warp Lightning cannons right in the dead center of the board. I had this nice shooting alley going all the way up to all the objectives, and the 2 units of Chaos Warriors in the back defending them. Up by the top where the Clan Rats are, it was 40 Clan Rats, 3 Jezzails, and the Bombardier. I thought that's a good base to hunker down and take care of. Let me make sure my feed is still going well. Okay. And take care of that top objective. Again, this bottom one was the one I felt the weakest on, just because these guys are a lot of beef, but it's only in 3 models, the Storm Fiends. So I felt really, really good. I thought I played very intelligently. I kept a hero near all of my hordes, like I didn't do the first game. I learned from that mistake very quickly. And yeah, so the turn 1 I got 5 points straight up. And I'll just come back to his list here. I have my little journal. And for his turn 1, he moved in and started attacking me. The Ripperdactyls came down, and they went after that super northern unit of Clan Rats, the ones up here. And so basically he wanted to shred them and take them off the objective. Well, they came down, and they hit the Clan Rats, but they did not hit them very hard. And I'm not sure, I don't know the Ripperdactyls rules. I know that their beaks turn to D3 hits and all this kind of exploding stuff, but they just didn't hit them hard enough. And so I spent a command point and passed that battle shock, and I still just had more models than him on that objective. The Carnosaur charged into the Plague Monks, which was good. Thrashed around, took out a lot of them, but not enough. And then the Chameleon Skinks, you can just see him. I took it right during his turn 1. They popped up back here and shot off a bunch of the Jezzails. So that was his target. He thought the Jezzails were the prime target. It's all about the shooting. And they were kind of my distraction thing. But it also meant that I had good shooting down here with the Jezzails, good shooting in the center with the Warp Lightning cannons, and good shooting up north with the 3rd unit of Jezzail. So I could do quite a bit of damage at range. It's his heroes. He was afraid of losing for sure. And from that, honestly, that is most of the game. Just like the Fire Slayer player got on the objectives and just asked, can you grind me off the objectives? I did the same thing with 40 Clan Rats up top, 40 Plague Monks in the center, and this little group down here. Now, admittedly, he could have grabbed the bottom objective. If my memory serves, it went the objective, in terms of which one is the most valuable. It went from the top to the bottom where these guys were, and then to the center on the 3rd round. And after turn 3, we called it, because at no point could he pull me off. The Ripperdactyls, they took out most of the Clan Rats. I think the game ended with 12 left. But once the middle objective became most valuable, he when I was pulling the dead, I pulled out of combat with the Ripperdactyls, and so he took the opportunity to send them into the Plague Monks and the Warp Lightning cannons, who blew them away. The Ripperdactyls went down because they're made of paper. The Carnosaur was no problem. So the game ended with all of his heroes except for the Carnosaur alive. He had the Starmaster, the Skink Priest, and the Slon all alive, but they were all hiding behind buildings from shooting. and the skinks just weren't enough numerically to pull the objectives away from the clan rats and plague monks. So yeah, what I will say is that I had a great time. Rob is a very nice person, and so we just agreed. There's like 45 minutes left in the round, so I was like, hey, do you just want to like sit and hang out? And so yeah, we called it. We kind of calculated like, how much would I reasonably be able to kill for kill points, and it was basically everything but his heroes, right? I wasn't going to go that far and shoot behind buildings and that kind of stuff, so basically his skinks would have died. So we just did the math on that, which we agreed upon, and we just hung out and chatted for a while. I asked him, like, why do you like Seraphon, and those kinds of stuff, and he asked me questions about Skaven. It was a great time. So it was also, I like finishing early so I can go stretch my legs and get some air. But that was a very fun game. As far as, first of all, I don't know much about Seraphon, to be honest with you. It's probably the army I'm the most unfamiliar with, mainly because in all of my binging of starting painting and selling armies, I just haven't gotten to this one yet. What I will say is Bastiladons are amazing. That thing was boss. I didn't realize it only had 8 wounds, but it tanked him like he had 30. And then, what else? The Chameleon Skinks were really, really cool. They were the bane of my Jezzail's existence because there was so much terrain, all these buildings on the table, all these things. He would pop up within an inch of it and just annihilate some Jezzails. Pop around, annihilate some Jezzails. So it was kind of cool. Beyond that, skinks just didn't do a whole lot of work, but that's cool. That's cool. And Ripperdactyls are terrifying. I'm not sure if it was just I don't know the unit enough to know if it was bad rolls or good rolls. I have no idea. I thought from what I read online that they'd be scarier to a unit of low armor save stuff. But there were just so many clan rats. I don't know. I have no idea. So we're gonna move into. Oh, actually, I do want to point out that the Rumscape feature for that one was Flaming Missiles. Improve the rend characteristic of missile weapons by 1 from the range of attacking units if the target unit is more than 12 inches away, which came into play for both of us because my Jezzails took advantage of that. So did the Storm Fiends, because they have like the big wind launcher cannon that can go 24. That's really it for me because the Warp Lightning Cannons don't use rend; they just do mortal wounds. But his skinks have a 16-inch range, and so he was doing really good at making sure that they got as many bonuses as possible because they're not the best quality shots. But he did a great job of, like, when he did shoot at me, generally speaking, there was always a rend attached because he positioned his models very well. So, yeah. I'm going to jump into round 3. Let me see before I if I have pictures before I do that whole business. Let's see. I did not get many pictures of my opponent's army, and I regret that. I'm going to go try and find some online when this is all done. But this one, we played Focal Points, which I have never played before, and it is by far my favorite mission. Like, I just instantly fell in love with it. If you're not familiar, let me make sure my camera's... There we go. Sorry about that. It's by far my favorite mission. So you have your board set up as normal, but the deployment is diagonal, which was a little bit of a problem. I actually stayed on the same table, so I had those big, tall buildings. It made it a little difficult to measure over them, but we did great. And my opponent for this was Chris Michelson, who I'll get to in a second in his list. And for this, you have a center objective, dead center of the board. Here's one in the center of your deployment zone, or the center of the table on your end. Center table on my end, and 2 on the side. So there's this perfect 5-point thing. And the way it works is if you have the center objective, it's worth 2 points. All the other objectives are worth 1 if you have them individually. However, if you have this one and this one, it's worth 3. If you have this one and this one, it's worth 3. If you just have one of them, it's worth 1. So the idea is it's incentivizing you to kind of spread across the board in weird ways and get all different kinds of objectives. And our Rumscape feature for this was Dazzling Glow. Subtract 1 from hit rolls made for attacks that target units that are in cover. The thing is, with those nice tall buildings, there was nothing to stand on to get cover, so it was useless for our specific table. But for some of their tables, it was backbreaking. So it's not a bad rule idea. I'll go here to my opponent's list. This was again Chris, who was an absolute blast to play. He was a lot of fun. Kept it lively, lots of joking, lots of laughing. And he had a Gaunt Summoner. He had Kairos Fate Weaver, a Lord of Change, and a Lord of Change. So there's obviously very magic, very mortal wounds heavy. For his battle line, he had 2 units of minimum-sized Chirurg Acolytes and Pink Horrors. So this is a lot of shooting. That's all like 4 to hit, 4 to wound. And 3 Flamers of Tzeentch and 1 Exalted Flamer of Tzeentch. Now, something that I didn't see him bring out, but he did pay for, was the Aether Void Pendulum and the Quicksilver Swords, which the swords would have actually been, I think, pretty useful because they get bonuses against Chaos stuff. And obviously I'm a Chaos army. But, yeah, I don't know. So, the way we deployed, and like I said, I try not to take too many pictures because, you know, I don't want to be rude. So here's the center line. You see our little tree objective there. I put the 40 clan rats on. There we go. I'll just use this as a pointer here. So let's see. It would have been 40 clan rats here. There you go. 40 clan rats on that. I had Plague Monks up the center. And then on the far side, I had a bunch of Chaos Warriors. I had a Lightning Cannon in the center and to the left. With the Plague Monks, I had the Engineer, Warlock Engineer, not the Bombardier dude. Bombardier was on the left. And I'll just show you a few pics to get you some sense of that. So obviously you have the Clan Rats. There's the Engineer. Right behind this building with them are 5 of the Scry Acolytes. In the center, I have a Warp Lightning Cannon, 3 Jezzails, my Arch Warlock, the 40 Plague Monks. A lot of beef right there in the center. Oop. And then on the right side, yes, there's the center. On the right side, another Warp Lightning Cannon, the Bombardier, Chaos Warriors, defending another thing of Jezzails and the Storm Fiends. So my thought was just see where he deploys and try to capitalize on stuff. So here's the thing. I'm looking at this list. Okay. This terrifies me because all he has to do is take out the Jezzails and the Lightning Cannons, and I have very little that can hurt him. I can take him down with weight of dice from the, the Plague Monks, but that's a long shot. So that was my thought, was I have a big blob on one objective, a big blob towards the center, and on the right, just a lot of guns. And so basically how this battle went down was he went first. He was out of range for a lot of his spells to hurt me. And then but he came forward a little bit. On my turn 1, if I'm not mistaken, I get a little confused because the first 2 turns go through really quickly because there's a lot of positioning. The first priority I had when I looked at this list was like, I need to make some big moves to get this done, because if I let him shoot into me with his magic and just guns, because all these things have like warp fire they shoot, he's gonna wreck me because there's no way I can survive all that. So I decided very early on, this is the match where I'm going to overcharge everything always all the time. We've got to take down those big models. And so between the Warplock Jezzails, we were first able, I think the first thing I was able to kill was the Gaunt Summoner. And he was prime target number 1 because his spell is devastating to hordes. The Gaunt Summoner was in the dead center. He had his eye on the Plague Monks, which were my main center objective grabbers. So he went down first. The next thing that went down was, if you didn't see it, give you some perspective. This is on my end. There's Kairos Fate Weaver on the right, along with my shooting units. Oh, I keep going wrong with this thing. Then there was a Lord of Change on the center and a Lord of Change to the right. And so the second thing to go down was the Lord of Change in the center. And this is, of course, over the first 2 to 3 turns. So I took out the Gaunt Summoner, the middle Lord of Change. So then my Plague Monks got on that center objective and just sat there. I was afraid he was going to send the far left Lord of Change into that 40 block of Clan Rats. And that was the most devastating thing, because they have no defense. What are they going to do? There's no heroes over there. There's no shooting over there. They're just 40 dudes sitting on an objective, not moving. Luckily, he basically he decided, I'm not going to go after the clan rats because that objective just has too many guys. Instead, I'm going to move the left Lord of Change to the center. When he did that, he brought it into range and view of the Warplock Jezzails and the lightning cannon that were in the dead center of the board. And so by doing that, I was able to snipe out that Lord of Change. Now, when I say snipe him out, it's not like he stepped into the board and I just like took him out without him doing anything. Like this whole time they're shooting magic, they're burning up plague monks. One of the Chaos Warrior units was dissolved into one dude. Plague monks they were gone by the end of the game. He was killing stuff. He was doing things. It wasn't enough to compensate. Like once your heroes are gone in a Tzeentch army, you're in dire straits. And so, that's pretty much what went down. On the right side, where all my those shooting units were, right here. In this top area, you can see is Kairos Fate Weaver. Kairos came over this building and plopped down on the side. And so basically between the Jezzails and the Warp Lightning Cannon were able to take him out. It took 2 turns. He did summon some blue horrors back there where there were a problem. But ultimately in the game what happened was I just ground out his heroes. And as things were diminishing, he just didn't have the spell power to destroy stuff. By the end of the game, I lost Jezzails and a unit of Chaos Warriors and Pestilent. The Plague Monks were gone. One of the Warp Lightning Cannons blew itself up. One had like 1 wound left. It was just a pittance of dudes. Now what's funny is that unit of Plague Clan Rats, this stuff, so he never came after them. And the whole time I was thinking like, okay, well that objective is secure. And then at turn 3, I thought to myself like, man, I should probably move these guys and get them into a more like strategic position or whatever. But honestly, like we were joking about it earlier in the day, it's like you just get so tired. So round 3 just drags on. And I was exhausted. And I was like, I don't want to move them. And he just laughed and he was like, you don't have to. I was like, okay, cool. So these guys were deployed here and never moved once the entire game. So that was fun, which was nice because I didn't. There's 40 less models I had to move. It was all about the Plague Monks who went toe to toe with that middle Lord of Change for 2 rounds, and all the shooting. And the shooting just took out the right people at the right times. Once the Karak Acolytes went away, he just didn't have the bodies to contest anything. That's on both sides. That's on the middle and the left. So it panned out pretty stinking well. So that is the event in a nutshell. I like this list he had. I mean, it was beautiful. Like I'm kicking myself for not getting a picture of his army like when it was on his little board that he had. Just because he has like a very like Taste of the rainbow pattern stuff on all the Lords of Change and Kairos. So that was beautiful. And the Karak Acolytes are pretty cool. They're my favorite models from the Tzeentch army range, but I don't see them a whole lot. The Flamers kicked my teeth in a little bit. Dissolved a bit of the Chaos Warrior unit, but he never tried an endless spell. And what's interesting is you can kind of see it in that picture, but if you were to put an endless spell like that, at least the pendulum sending down this center alley, there's buildings on the right side here. Like he could have easily torn several D6s worth of mortal wounds into those Plague Monks. So I'm not quite sure why I didn't do that, but that is totally okay. So let's see here. Yeah, so like there's the 2 buildings. If he had sent the pendulum down the center, like there's just nowhere to go. I mean, it would have torn through the Plague Monks, the Arch Warlock, the Jezzails, the Chaos Warriors. So I'm not sure. I'm sure he had a reason for it. He's a very experienced player. He usually plays Legions of Nagash armies. But that was honestly what I was more afraid of. So, notable things, because I took the policy of overcharging everything all the time, always, the Warp Lightning Cannons just about blew themselves up. Like I said, one did. One had 1 wound left. The Bombardier definitely blew himself up. I overcharged his rocket and he rolled a 1. I didn't overcharge the spells, any of the spells because he's such a magic heavy army. If you're not familiar, the Arch Warlock and the two engineers, the Bombardier and the other guy, basically they say like, hey, you can overcharge your spell and it does double damage, all this kinds of crazy stuff. But if you fail or if it's unbound, you blow up. Okay, well, I'm facing such a magic heavy army, like I'm just not going to do that. So that was the only time I didn't. But with all the guns that I could, I definitely did. And so they were able to kind of pull the weight. The real MVP, actually, let's just step back. Let's step back and talk about kind of the day as a whole. First of all, I had a great time. It was an absolute blast. All my opponents were very nice. A lot of well-painted armies, that kind of stuff. I'll show you some pictures of the armies here in a second. My MVP of the day, for sure, was my Plague Monks. And so the reason that is, they are 40 dudes that if you have a unit to give them Inspiring Presence, which I didn't the first game, but I figured it out real quick and did the next two games, they mess stuff up bad, like in a big way. And so, yeah, it's exactly what I did. I just had them run towards an objective and asked my opponent, can you handle 40 dudes? Because if you can't, like, they're going to hurt you when you get back. Things I learned from the thing, because again, this is all about learning how to play Skaven and that kind of stuff, was with Plague Monks, I like a lot of their abilities. I mean, just the number of attacks they get is unreal. Because I think at one point I got 5 attacks on the charge, because they have the sword that does 2 plus 1 for charging, and the staff that gets 1 plus 1 for charging, so sum total 5. I hate their banners. And if you don't know, like, basically they have a banner that says a hit roll of a 6 is rend. Gets rend to the attack character or the profile. Awesome stuff. But then they also have this like instrument or whatever like that says wound rolls of 6 get double damage, plus 1 of their damage characteristic. And so the problem is that you can then have 4 piles of dice, each with different weapon profiles. This one has rend 1 damage, this one has rend 2 damage, this one has no rend 1 damage, this one has no rend 2 damage. So it's very cumbersome to keep track of. Wasn't my favorite part of the thing, but all I needed to do was sit there and die. So I like them more than Clan Rats, because even though they were on those objectives doing the same thing that Clan Rats do, they were contributing. I mean, when they went toe-to-toe with Lord of Change for several turns, it was a Lord of Change here and a unit of 10 pink horrors, and they fought both of them for 2 rounds. And I was like, yes. So I like battle line units that contribute to the game. It makes me more excited to build and paint up my Clan Pestilence army. I actually that day brought a Plague Furnace that was being commission painted to a gentleman there, so that's going to be worked on here pretty soon, and I'll be able to show that off, and I'm very excited about it. Beyond that, let me go back to my list here. Other things that were super important to the Plague Monks, I think, were number 1. Beyond them, the Warp Lightning Cannons did put in some huge work, mostly in the third game. You know, when stuff hit the wall and I was like, I just need to get rid of these heroes, being able to overcharge everything was just a solid idea. I didn't overcharge them all the time, always, every game. Like mostly in the Seraphon game, I didn't. I overcharged them a few times, but not every time. And the reason was because I had good board control. I didn't need to. In the first game, I did because shooting was hampered to 12 inches, and I just needed to make up time. But that didn't really help. One thing that was super funny was I declared that I was overcharging the Warp Lightning Cannon, and this is in the Tzeentch game, he said, okay, stop. Kairos Fate Weaver is going to use his ability and make your power die a 6. And I was like, oh no! And he wound up still doing 3 mortal wounds, and I took 3 from the overcharge, so it was actually a pretty good wash. But yeah, trying to think of what else from my list. The Acolytes did nothing for me. They were just point fillers. I understand that they get better as you do Scryer Allegiance or even Skaven-Tide Allegiance, and they're in large blobs. I get it. I'm not really a huge fan of them, actually. The Storm Fiends were a really great distraction. I think people fear them more than they should. But they're just beefy. You know, at no point in the day, I think the unit was never destroyed. It just went down to 1 guy, I think, in the Fire Slayers game. Um, so I mean, they're okay. They're really not great. They performed, I don't know, enough of an anchor for me, but not much more than that. Chaos Warriors were great because they have a 4-up save, 2 wounds each. They just got in the way. They were great to have little 5-man squads to just basically keep an opponent from deploying somewhere. Allows like summon things to be outside 9 inches. That's exactly what they did, and they did great at it. Beyond that, so I didn't have Warp Spark tokens because it's not a Skaventide army. So the Engineer and the Warlock dudes, they just didn't do a whole lot in terms of like their only spells are damage dealing. Beyond that, their only abilities are the Bombardier can overload his rocket, and the Engineers, both of those, if they're near a Warp Lightning cannon, can overcharge it. And that's all they did most of the game. But they didn't, we weren't playing a scenario where you had to have a hero or an artifact or that, but so it would actually end up being okay. Trying to think of what else. Giselles are all right. I was expecting more from them, but 1 attack each. Rerolls if you stand still. They did some cool stuff, but they were not the powerhouse that I expected. My third opponent, Chris, suggested that I try out 1 unit of 6, which I will. I'll try that. I'll give that a roll. And that should be just fine. So I'm going to open up to the chat. Does anyone have any questions of stuff that I may have missed? Questions about my list, what I want to do forward, just ask anything you'd like. And in the meantime, if you could just write question in all caps and then ask it, I will go ahead and just share some fun picks of the day. So just as you guys are asking any questions here. So I have the storefront. This was a Nurgle army that came in third. Carrie, who was in the car with us, she has a wonderfully painted army. And it's just a lot of sitting on objectives and grinding the opponent out. She did try for the first time her Plague Monks as well. That was super fun to see. Let's see what else we got. There's the Fire Slayers again. Casabar says, question, favorite opponent. Who's my favorite opponent? Favorite opponent. I had probably the most fun with Rob, my Seraphon opponent, round 2. And it was probably the most relaxed in the third round with Chris. But I had a lot more laughs and stuff like that with Rob, so it was a good time. King Brett says, question, where are the Gnawholes? You only get Gnawholes if you are Allegiance Skaventide or one of the Skaven variants. And this is Allegiance Grand Alliance Chaos because I don't have enough Clan Rats. So I had to use 2 units of 5 Chaos Warriors. They don't ally in, nothing like that, and they wouldn't count as battle line anyway. So I don't have them. I mean, I own them, but I couldn't take them in my army. So yeah. Which actually, I pulled this up. So Jack sent this to me in the morning. Because I did that, I'm actually in ITC. Second tournament, I ranked as number 2 for Grand Alliance Chaos, which is super funny. That says more about Grand Alliance Chaos than it does about me. But I thought that was really funny. So yeah, so you are talking to the number 2 Grand Alliance Chaos player as of this moment, which is sure going to change because it's like only a handful of events right now. I think their season just restarted. But I want to show something super fun. Okay, so 2019 Age of Sigmar ITC rankings. This is over everything ever, and look at this number 3. Who this is? That is Jack from Rerolling Ones, killing it with a Shooting Stormcast army. What's funny is right below him is a gentleman named Jace, who is also in our local area. So we have quite a few folks who are. Oh yeah, and Alex. I believe that's the same Alex that's local. So we have quite a few people from the Pacific Northwest. I think because our tournament season, I don't know, started maybe a little earlier than other stuff. That we have a few more games in. But yeah, this is incredible. So we have a lot of cool people. As far as clubs go, I mentioned it on the last show that I talked about a tournament, but Victorious Secret is a local gaming club, and that's actually what Jack's a part of. And it's very cool stuff. Yeah, our group shows up quite a bit here. And I say our group, I'm not part of Victorious Secret, but I mean like our general area, people I know show up quite a bit. So that's really, really cool. Go back to pictures here. Let's see. Hawkbat, I believe it's that. Question: how do you transport large model counts and units safely? For me, I have a KR multi-case, which is they have this tray, like a foam tray, where you can put 50 small models, like 50 clan rats, in one thing. And so that's how I do it. I mainly got that case because I'm going to be taking it to Nova. But if you're talking about locally, I'd probably get something magnetic. So I'm not quite sure. Let's see here. No holes. Daniel Baker, question: how do you compare this tournament against the few other one you did a few months ago? This one was a little bit more competitive, I think. This store, it's their first one, so they went a little soft on some of the things like terrain features and secondary objectives, that kind of stuff. But the breed of player, what the people were there for, it was definitely a little more on the competitive side. People want to perform well. I was one of the few unpainted armies, and that's because I was just showing up to support the tournament organizer. It was fun. All of my games, I had a good time. I enjoyed all my opponents. The first game, because like I said, I think my opponent got it's a little twisted around when it came to like remembering certain roles, especially ones that involve your opponent. But he was a nice person. His army looked beautiful, so I didn't have any problems. I thought people were very kind and respectful of personal space and time and all those things. As far as the time, that's an important one. The first event I went to, lunch ran super late, and then I got to buy the second round so that like I could stay until like 10:30 and play the third round. I was like, nah, I'm just gonna duck out. This one, they did a great job of, there's a lot of restaurants nearby. They gave us an exact time. Things started and ended within like 15-ish minutes. That's perfectly acceptable. It's very reasonable, so I thought it was a great time. Very well run, great store. It wasn't like it got so hot that like dude heat made it all uncomfortable. So it was a great tournament experience. It was definitely that step up in terms of like competitiveness, which is something I want to slowly start jumping into. And so it was good. It was a good little dip my toe into that. It was good to see what people are bringing in our local area. And there's just all kinds of lists. There's a very elite Stormcast list that I think came in, I don't know what place he came in. There's Daughters of Cain. Nurgle was up there. I didn't see a Nagash list yesterday. I might have missed it. There's definitely a Nighthaunt player who's a cool guy. Yeah. So it was good. Good diversity of armies. Let's see. Claws Minis. Isn't Alex Gonzalez the co-host of Garage Hammer? I don't know. We have an Alex Gonzalez here. I do know Alex Gonzalez is the co-host of Garage Hammer. Not sure if they're the same person. That's why I said I don't know. John McCarthy, how are you doing on the book club? I'm almost done. It took a back seat just for a little bit because, I announced the book club, and then that's pretty much that same day or week I found out that I could actually attend this event. So like everything stopped, and I just started binging information about how to play Skaven and Grand Alliance Chaos well. So it'll come back around. I'll be on there pretty soon. Let's see here, but it is going really well. People have responded very, very positively to it. A few people signed up to be patrons, and it was awesome. Just to have a good dialogue in there. So yeah, it was a fun time. Let's see. Castlebar said you can blame VS for the competitiveness. That's funny. Yeah, but it's not. So if you don't know, in our area, the Victoria's Secret Club is more towards the Seattle to South area, like Tacoma area, and they actually play out some games in Bremerton, which is west of Seattle, more towards the coast. And this was a tournament that was trying to kind of branch that group in, like pull them a little bit further north. Bellingham's like an hour north, like I said, from me. So almost 2 hours for some of the people in that group. So it was like almost 50-50 split between people in the game group that I normally run with, like the Victoria's Secret guys, and that kind of competitive scene, and the local Bellingham area. So it's just different folks, and everyone had something in common. Well, just like Mario, it went really well. There were a few hiccups, people who got a little bit salty about their losses and got a little vocal about that saltiness and made some uncomfortable experiences for no reason. But on the whole, things are really great. People had a good time. But I don't blame, like, I wouldn't say like Victoria's Secret were the only competitive ones. I don't believe that for a second, because some of the local guys who hadn't gone to any of those events were just as salty and tight and competitive about the stuff. So it's whatever. It takes time to adjust to a different level of play for sure. And I'm experiencing that as well. And yes, and you didn't see it up here at the very, very top of the screen, right up there. Basically, Rob, my round 2 opponent, is having a Carnosaur. It's still like mid-conversion, but he's busting out of the ground. He hasn't decided if it's out of the ground or underwater, but he's calling the Troglodon a land shark. And so he was coming out of the ground there. It'll be a really cool thing when it's all done for sure. I think that is about all that I have if no one has any more questions, like I said. So what this makes me think about when I think about going to how I want to develop my army further. Actually, I'll show my army list one last time. So the Scryer stuff went really, really well. And that's still at this point what I'm really considering taking to Nova. Just because it's low model count. I have the cases for it. It's very, very straightforward. The Giselles were awesome. They didn't perform as much as I thought they were, but they were scary enough that my opponent focused on them to the detriment of everything else. Warp Lightning Cannons were legit. But, like I said, the thing I had the most fun with, and the thing that definitely was the most valuable player, was the Plague Monks. And so, if you don't know, if you haven't seen that Instagram, Facebook picture I put up, basically I am going to be doing a Clan Pestilence army. Not necessarily for travel, but then it doesn't have to be. The Scryer was for travel. But the Pestilence stuff, my goodness, it's good. It's real good. I didn't have anything to buff them. They were just a unit of Plague Monks, and that's all there was. The only buff that they had was Inspiring Presence. And, my goodness, they just tore through things and then just took objectives like bosses. And so, yeah, I'm having the Plague Furnace commissioned by an awesome man, Sean. But I'll talk about that more later on when I get it back. Beyond that, looking at, I don't know. Let's see here. Yeah, the Plague Monks were hard to shit. I'm just going to have to chat too. Cody the Bear, low model count. Man, I don't want to move those 40 models. Well, here's the thing I think people don't understand. When I got rid of the Beast of Chaos army, it was to get a Scryer army that is easy to transport, of which it is. Because if you look at the Scryer stuff in my list, it is 5 Acolytes, 3 Storm Fiends, Warp Lightning Cannons, and a few heroes. And that's generally what it's going to be. However, because Skaven is so big and so awesome in terms of like the umbrella of factions within it, I have enough, freedom to have an entire Scryer army, but then I can also do whatever I want for stuff that won't travel, and that will be the Plague Monks and the Clan Pestilence stuff. So I can have both, and they still work for the same army. I just can develop that army in 2 very, very different ways, and that's exactly what I'm excited for. So like I said, at this point, Nova is going to be the Scryer things because they're easy to transport locally, and on rerolling ones, hopefully at some point you will see some Plague Monks. So I think when people scoffed when I said I'm getting rid of the Beast of Chaos to get a more elite army, and they just assumed that I meant like Skaven with 200 models. Not at all. So yeah, the Scryer stuff was for Nova. So anyway, that's all that I have here. I'm trying to think of what else I got going on. Nope, that's all fine. Okay, perfect. So friends, if you don't have any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and end up this chat. But basically, the event was awesome. Dark Tower Games was great. I liked the missions, Focal Points. I never played it before, but I love it. It's one of my new favorite ones because it makes you move in weird ways to claim strange objectives. And I thought it was an absolute blast. So if you have any questions, go ahead about the event and my list and stuff like that. Leave in the comments down below, and I'll be seeing you there. Thank you so much, and happy wargaming.